Please, let me explain.
Listen, my people. Come and sit down well, because today's story will teach you that when you set a trap for somebody else, sometimes you are the one who ends up catching feelings. Sit back, relax, and let's go to Ogudu, Lagos, where one retired school teacher's meddling nearly caused a small family war and somehow ended up blessing two people who never even knew they were looking for each other. This is the story of Aunty Yetunde and the WhatsApp groom that wasn't even supposed to exist. Now, before we go further, my people, let me introduce you to the players in this drama, because you need to understand each person well or you will get lost halfway. First, there is Kelechi, 29 years old, an engineer, hardworking, quiet, the type of man who says please and thank you to the conductor even when the conductor is the one overcharging him. Kelechi was engaged, my people, ring bought, church booked, asoebi already selected by both families, when suddenly, 3 months before the wedding, his fiancée, a young lady called Chiamaka, packed one small bag and disappeared to her cousin's house in Abuja, leaving behind only a text message that said, "I need space to think." Space to think, my people. In this life, when a woman who is 3 months from her wedding suddenly needs space to think, that space is usually not empty. Something or someone is occupying that space. Kelechi was devastated, confused, embarrassed, but nobody in that family was more disturbed than Aunty Yetunde, his father's older sister. Now, let me tell you about Aunty Yetunde, because this woman, my people, this woman is a whole character on her own. Retired secondary school teacher, widow for 12 years, and blessed or cursed, depending on who you ask, with more free time than the National Assembly during recess. Aunty Yetunde believed firmly in her heart of hearts that Chiamaka had run off with another man, not because she had proof, not because anybody told her anything concrete, but because, in her words, a woman does not just leave a good man for nothing. There is always another man hiding somewhere in the grammar. She decided, my people, that she would get to the bottom of this matter herself, and this is how the whole comedy began. One evening, sitting in her parlor with her reading glasses low on her nose and her old Infinix phone in her hand, Aunty Yetunde had an idea that she considered at the time to be the most brilliant strategy since the invention of sliced bread. She would create a fake profile, a fake attractive young man, she decided at first, to message Chiamaka directly and see if she would respond to advances, thereby proving her theory of infidelity beyond reasonable doubt. But my people, technology and Aunty Yetunde have never been on speaking terms. In her attempt to set up this account, fumbling through settings she barely understood, asking her house help to help her tap the correct button, she somehow created a profile of a young woman instead. A young, smiling, fashionable lady with the name Peace Nwosu, using a photograph she found in her old phone gallery, a graduation photo of Kelechi's cousin, Nkem, who was studying accounting in Canada and had absolutely no idea at this point that her face was about to become the most contested photograph in 3 families' history. Aunty Yetunde looked at what she had created, scratched her head, and thought, well, no harm. Maybe I will use this one to join groups and find out gist about this Chiamaka matter from another angle. She joined a general singles chat group, the type of lonely people who gather to argue about football and occasionally flirt, using peace as her identity, planning simply to gather information, to be, as she called it, an undercover investigator for the family. That, my people, was her first mistake. Her second, and by far her biggest mistake, was the way she wrote as Peace. You see, Aunty Yetunde had not updated her vocabulary since around 2003. When she typed as this supposedly 26-year-old woman, out came phrases like, "Good day to you, kind sir. How is the weather treating you this fine evening?" And, "I must say, you caught a rather dashing figure in your profile photograph." My people, no 26-year-old on earth talks like this. But somehow, in a chat group full of people typing WYD and you up, Aunty Yetunde's old-school, overly formal, painfully polite texting style stood out like an agbada at a jeans and sneakers party. And one man in that group, A certain Uche, 32 years old, works in a bank in Victoria Island, recently broken-hearted from a relationship that ended badly the year before, noticed peace immediately. "This one is different," Uche told his younger sister Ifeoma one evening, showing him his phone with the excitement of a boy who just found treasure. "She doesn't do all this WYD nonsense. She's classy. She writes like she actually went to school." Ifeoma, 26, sharp-eyed and permanently suspicious of every woman who showed interest in her brother since the last one broke his heart into pieces and used the pieces as confetti, squinted at the screen. "Uche, something is not right." Which 26-year-old writes, "I must say," like she's presenting a thesis defense? Uche said, maybe she's just well brought up, and he told this to his younger sister Ifeoma. My people, that was the beginning of the WhatsApp romance that nobody, absolutely nobody, saw coming.
Aunty Yetunde, meanwhile, was thoroughly enjoying herself. What started as an investigation had, without her even noticing, become entertainment. Every evening, after her programs on television, she would sit with her phone, replying to Uche's messages, calling him things like "my dear sugar plum." A phrase, my people, that Uche found charmingly old-fashioned and adorable, not knowing it was a phrase Aunty Yetunde's own late husband used to call her back in 1988. "Sugar plum," Uche would say to Ifeoma, sighing like a schoolboy. "Nobody calls anybody sugar plum anymore. This is real romance, Ify, old-school romance." Ifeoma was not convinced. Ifeoma, my people, had appointed herself the official chief security officer of her brother's love life, and she began quietly monitoring the chats over his shoulder, asking pointed questions whenever Peace said something suspicious, which, considering it was a 60-something-year-old widow typing, was often. Weeks passed. The chatting grew deeper. Aunty Yetunde had by this point completely forgotten her original mission of catching Chiamaka. She was now fully invested in her own fictional love story, telling Kelechi one afternoon without thinking properly about what she was saying, "You know, I have met a fine young man online, very respectful, calls Peace very sweet names." Kelechi looked up slowly from his phone. "Auntie, what do you mean by peace? Who is Peace?" And that, my people, is how Kelechi found out what his auntie had been doing. His mouth fell open so wide you could have packed a danfo inside it. "Auntie, you created a fake account using Nkem's picture? Nkem, our cousin, the one in Canada?" "It's not a big matter," Aunty Yetunde said, waving her hand like she was dismissing a fly. "It was the Chiamaka case I was investigating. Nkem will never even know. She is thousands of kilometers away reading her books. And this man, this Uche, he thinks he's talking to a 26-year-old lady. He's a very serious young man, educated, works in a bank, very respectful boy." Kelechi, my people, put his head in his hands. "Auntie, this thing will not end well." But Aunty Yetunde, stubborn as ever, refused to shut it down. "Let me just finish investigating," she insisted, though by now everyone in the house, including the house help, knew she had stopped investigating anything weeks ago and was simply enjoying being flirted with under a fake name.
Then came the request that changed everything. Uche, growing more serious by the week, finally asked for a video call. My people, Aunty Yetunde nearly dropped her phone into her own soup. She stalled for 3 days, giving excuses. "My network is not good today, I am attending a program, my phone camera is spoiling." But Uche, patient but persistent, kept asking, and even Ifeoma, watching from the sidelines, started saying to her brother, "See, this is exactly what I mean. Something is not right. A serious person will not run from video call for 1 whole week." Cornered, Aunty Yetunde did what any resourceful Nigerian auntie facing exposure would do. She called an emergency family meeting. Well, emergency meeting meaning she summoned Kelechi to her parlor and told him, "You will help me. Tonight, we are doing a video call and you will sit beside me and help me manage it." "Auntie, I am a man. How will I appear on video as Peace?" You will not appear. You will be off camera, feeding me what to say, and if the network conveniently cuts at the wrong moment, that is not our fault. Technology fails people every day. My people, that night's video call was, without exaggeration, one of the most chaotic 10 minutes in the history of Nigerian romance. Aunty Yetunde sat angled so only half her face, an old photograph of Nkem propped cleverly behind her phone at an angle that occasionally barely caught a corner in frame, while she kept her actual face mostly off-screen, claiming camera position wahala. While Kelechi crouched beside her on the floor, whispering responses, occasionally grabbing the phone entirely and pretending the video had frozen when Uche asked a question too specific. "Peace, why does your voice sound a bit different tonight?" Uche asked at one point, squinting at his screen where the picture kept lagging suspiciously. "I have kata," Aunty Yetunde said quickly, then coughed dramatically into the phone for effect, nearly knocking the propped photograph clean off the table in the process. Kelechi, crouched beside her, had to slap his own hand over his mouth to keep from laughing out loud and exposing the entire operation. My people, only God knows how they survived that call. Uche, love-struck and forgiving, simply concluded that Peace's network in her area was generally poor and left it at that. But the real story, the one nobody was planning for, was happening quietly on the side. Because while Aunty Yetunde was busy managing her elaborate lie, Ifeoma had, out of pure suspicious diligence, insisted on adding herself to some of the group chats and calls to supposedly protect her brother's interest. And in one of these group settings, a voice note exchange arranged supposedly to verify Peace's family background, it was actually Kelechi who ended up responding on several occasions, since Aunty Yetunde often handed him the phone to just handle the small talk while I rest my voice. And my people, this is where the real love story of this whole saga quietly began. Because Kelechi and Ifeoma, talking back and forth under the disguise of helping their relatives verify a relationship, actually found themselves enjoying each other's conversation. Real conversation, no lies attached, since Kelechi, when speaking as himself and not as Peace's cousin or whatever role he was assigned that day, was simply being Kelechi. "Your cousin's family seems interesting," Ifeoma told him one night, laughing at something he'd said. "You don't even know," Kelechi replied, laughing too, thinking privately, if only you knew the half of it. Eventually, Uche, still deeply smitten with Peace and frustrated by the endless video call excuses, suggested a proper physical meeting. "Enough of this online, he told Ifeoma. "I want to meet her in person. Let's arrange something, maybe a family dinner, nothing too much pressure." Panic set in immediately on Aunty Yetunde's side. There was no version of reality where a 60-something widow could show up in place of a 26-year-old graduate. She needed a solution fast. "Kelechi," she announced, "you will go and represent Peace's family at this meeting. Tell them Peace herself is camera shy and nervous about first meeting, so her cousin is coming first to make sure everything is proper and safe, as any good Nigerian family would insist on." My people, this is the kind of plan that only works in stories, and yet somehow it worked. Because when Kelechi arrived at the agreed meeting point, a quiet restaurant in Lekki, the person waiting to represent Uche's side, sent for the exact same protective reason, was Ifeoma. The two of them stood there, staring across the restaurant table, both suddenly realizing the voice they'd been enjoying on those verification calls now had a face in front of them. "Wait," Ifeoma said slowly, "you are Peace's cousin who's been talking to me?" "You are Uche's sister who's been talking to me," Kelechi said back, equally stunned. They both burst out laughing at the same time, the kind of laughter that comes when two people realize the universe has been quietly setting them up while they thought they were just doing family duty. That dinner, meant to be a quick, cautious formality, turned into 3 hours of genuine conversation, genuine laughter, and a genuine connection that neither the fake Peace nor the real Uche had anything to do with. But my people, while love was quietly blooming on one side of this drama, the original lie was getting heavier and heavier to carry. Uche, patient as he'd been, was growing tired of never meeting Peace herself, and Aunty Yetunde, drunk on the attention and unwilling to let go of Sugar Plum calling her sweet names every evening, kept finding new excuses, digging herself deeper into a hole that was clearly going to collapse eventually. And collapsed it did, my people, in the most spectacular way possible.
It happened on a Sunday afternoon, at what was supposed to be a simple, low-pressure lunch that Ifeoma had arranged, genuinely this time, no disguises, to introduce Kelechi properly to her brother, since by this point, the real romance between the two of them had progressed to a level requiring formal family involvement. Uche, thrilled that his sister had finally found someone decent, agreed happily, no idea whatsoever of the tangled history connecting everyone at that table. Aunty Yetunde was also invited, as Kelechi's guardian auntie, entirely unaware that the Uche her nephew kept mentioning as my girlfriend's brother was the very same man she had been secretly video calling for months as Peace. The moment Aunty Yetunde walked into that restaurant and saw Uche's face, the same face from all those video calls, her own face did something between a heart attack and a stroke, freezing mid-step in the doorway. Uche, looking up and seeing this elderly woman staring at him with an expression of pure terror, was confused for exactly 4 seconds before his phone, sitting innocently on the table, buzzed with a notification. A message from Peace. My people, in her panic, in her absolute confusion at seeing Uche in person, Aunty Yetunde's trembling hand had accidentally sent a message from Peace's account, the one she still had logged in on her phone, meant for nobody in particular, just a nervous, confused half-sentence that read, "Uche, is that really you sitting there? I don't know what to..." Uche looked at his phone. Then he looked up at Aunty Yetunde, standing frozen in the doorway. Then back at his phone, then back at Aunty Yetunde. The restaurant, my people, went dead silent, except for the soft clinking of a waiter's tray somewhere in the background, perfectly timed for maximum drama. "Aunty," Kelechi started, standing up slowly with both hands raised like a man trying to calm an approaching thunderstorm. "Let me explain everything, please, before anybody says anything they will regret." And he explained, my people, every detail. The failed investigation into Chiamaka, the accidental creation of Peace using Nkem's old photo, the video call disguised with a propped-up picture, Aunty Yetunde's sugar plum romance. Everything laid bare on that restaurant table like evidence at a trial. Uche sat there through the entire explanation, his face moving through every human emotion available. Shock, confusion, embarrassment, and finally, slowly, my people, something that looked suspiciously like relief. "So," he said, looking at Aunty Yetunde, "Sugar Plum was you the whole time." "I am sorry, my son," Aunty Yetunde said, and for the first time in this entire saga, her voice actually shook with genuine shame. "It started as something else, and I don't even know how it turned into this. I never meant for you to actually fall for anything real." Uche let out a long breath, then, surprisingly, started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from a man who has just realized his entire online romance was with a 60-something-year-old widow with kata excuses and a hidden photograph, and somehow finds it more funny than tragic. "Do you know," he said, shaking his head, "I actually told my mother about you. I told her Peace was different, classy, well brought up. I didn't know I was basically describing somebody's auntie." The whole table, tension finally broken, erupted in laughter, even Aunty Yetunde herself joining in, wiping actual tears of embarrassment from her eyes. But my people, here is the sweetness in this whole mess. Because while the fake romance had crashed and burned right there on that restaurant table, 2 real ones had already quietly taken root underneath it. Kelechi and Ifeoma, holding hands under the table through the entire confession, were already deeply, genuinely in love, built on actual conversations that had nothing to do with any disguise. And Uche, freed from a fantasy that could never have gone anywhere, found himself, weeks later, properly introduced by an apologetic Aunty Yetunde, this time with full honesty, to a genuine family friend's daughter, a lady she had actually been meaning to introduce him to for over a year before this whole Peace nonsense derailed her focus. And what of Chiamaka, the original reason this entire chaos began? My people,
The truth came out eventually, delivered plainly by Chiamaka herself when she finally returned to Lagos and sat down with Kelechi to properly end their engagement. There was no other man, no secret lover, no scandal. She had simply panicked under the pressure of a wedding she felt she wasn't ready for. Pressure that had been, ironically, made heavier by Aunty Yetunde's constant interference and unsolicited opinions about every wedding detail. Chiamaka needed space, exactly as she'd said, nothing more sinister than that. Aunty Yetunde, hearing this, went quiet for a long moment, then admitted, humbled thoroughly by the events of recent months. So all this wahala I caused, and there was never even any man to catch? No, Auntie, Kelechi said gently, unable to resist a small smile. But somehow, your useless investigation still managed to find me a real one. 6 months later, my people, there were 2 engagement announcements in that family within the same season. Kelechi and Ithioma, and separately, Uche and his new, properly and honestly introduced lady. Aunty Yetunde, riding the wave of her accidental success, declared herself with a completely straight face a professional matchmaker and began quietly hinting to every single person in her church about her proven track record, conveniently leaving out the part where her proven track record started with a fake profile, a stolen photograph, and a phrase like sugar plum that Uche's friends still tease him about to this day. So here, my people, is what this story leaves for us. Sometimes the lies we tell to protect the people we love have a strange way of accidentally revealing the truths those same people needed all along. Don't be too quick to meddle in matters that are not fully yours to solve, but also don't be too surprised when a mess made from good intentions somehow blossoms into something good anyway. God, and sometimes even one confused old auntie with bad Wi-Fi, works in mysterious ways. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. And please drop a comment and tell me, has an auntie, uncle, or meddling relative in your family ever caused chaos while trying to help? We want to hear your own version of Aunty Yetunde. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. No fake profile here, this one's real. See you in the next episode, my people. Bye.